question of suffering well. Now, joining us on the line is Jullian Hoss, a practicing psychologist and couples therapist known for helping partners reconnect and align, especially during life's hardest seasons. Jullian, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's lovely being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Jullian, let's start off with redefinitions. And I'm saying redefining because I was using the word suffer, or rather the term suffer well. And not one, not two, but most of the people I spoke to were like, Sheila, no, I don't even want to hear the rest of your statement. Why do I need to suffer? Right? What is this suffering that you're calling me to? And so perhaps let's give a bit of context and maybe redefine suffering well in terms of relationships.
Well, it is a good question. And I think for me, it really comes together. It's like, are we suffering together or are we feeling with the person who is suffering? And I think for me, it really comes down to creating space for your partner or whoever is in pain at the specific point in time or is going through a hard time. And that for me also makes a huge difference because people don't want to feel like we're suffering and then we're stuck in pain with our partner. But it is very important that we create a space and we don't isolate our partner. And I think the image that always comes into our mind, if someone is in a really bad space, it feels like they're sitting in a dark hole, and suffering with them is sometimes jumping into the hole and sitting there with them. And that makes people feel like we'll never get out of here. And then it feels defeating. But really empathizing with someone, creating space is to build like a ladder down and say, hey, I can see you here and I can see it's dark and I'm here with you. But with time, you can use my ladder and we can climb out together.
Jullian, however, that does sound like a context where one of the two is going through something. What if we have both come to some kind of pain and trauma? Maybe we lost a child together. You know, maybe we went through a process that sort of left us in pain as a collective. How do I begin to make space for your experience while I'm going through the very same thing?
That is really hard. And we can also see in the research that a huge trauma like losing a child together puts a serious strain on a relationship. And it can also strengthen a relationship though. And it's very interesting because in the past, psychologists would always say, oh, you're going through 5 stages of grief and you can write off multiple years of your life because it's such serious trauma that life somehow pauses. And I think it's super interesting to look into the new research where we see that life doesn't pause. It's more like we go in and out of pain, we go in and out of grief while life continues. And we can actually learn a lot from children because grief for adults is often like a background noise we're experiencing, but kids, they still want to feel their body, they still want to play, they still want to enjoy while they're grieving. And it's interesting that the latest research shows that we adults also have that need for life to continue. And what is important in a relationship is that we still also make time to spend the relationship together, and then we learn how our partner experiences grief. And we can even use in counseling and therapy, for example, I use metaphors or images. I ask the couples, explain to your partner if your grief was here in the room. If it was an object, if it was a person, how would it look like? And that is incredibly important because we're quick to assume that if we have loss, we experience it the same, but that is totally not true. But the purpose is also not to feel exactly what your partner is feeling. The purpose of the relationship, if we suffer well together, is that you feel my partner is there. I can reach out to them. I can get through to them. I'm not alone with it. And that's why I would say it's really creating a space or holding space for your partner to feel whatever they're feeling at that point in time. But this is super hard because if we love someone, we want them to feel better in an instance. And that's why it's so difficult for us to hold space if our partner is unwell.
You spoke of the realities, and I suppose you gave us the context of a child, where there's acknowledgement that life does go on, right? I have found that as an adult, when you want life to go on, you switch off that part of you that's suffering. You switch off the
Mm-hmm.
pain. And you did say, and you did make mention of this, if you will, switch between going through the pain and allowing life to go through. But I found that it also sends you back into the survival mode where you've
Yeah,
completely
very
switched off
often.
the pain experience or dealing with the trauma, so much so that you thrive in this ongoing life without looking back and realizing that that's going to affect you. How do we stop that from happening?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say you're thriving. You know, when I realized that it's so interesting, we
Yeah.
do retreats also in Pretoria and we do different themes.
Yeah.
So we ran some detox retreats on feeling your body again, healing your body, feeling healthier in your body. And it struck me that most women who were there, after a few hours or days at the retreat, revealed a serious loss or a serious trauma that was a few months or years apart from, or like before the retreat.
Yeah.
And when we traced back the physical symptoms, we realized that they were all traced or linked to that event. And that's what happens when you swallow it. The pain manifests and festers in your body, and it will find its way out. And you know, our soul keeps on knocking and says, hey, we're not fine, we're not fine. And if you say, no, be quiet, I don't want to feel this pain, we need to move on, it will knock a bit louder. And if you still don't listen, your body will start send you signals. And if you still don't listen, at some point it might actually say, you have to break. Because the only way through grief is through grief. The only way through pain is through pain. We can't look it out. But what we found in research is that we can oscillate. We can oscillate in and out, and we can still do our daily task. We can still relate to others. We can still see certain parts of beauty in our daily lives and create space for the pain and the suffering, whatever it is. And that's why it can be helpful to have even small routines in day to day as a couple or alone, where you actually think of what are the difficult things that have happened so that you can process them. And it really helps couples to share those experiences, to feel connected through the pain. Because one thing about our bodies, if you shut down your painful emotions, our body has a funny way. Our body can just tone down emotions. It can't say, I'm toning down the negative emotions, but I'm still feeling all of the positive emotions. That's impossible. So if you tone down the negative emotion, your body just goes numb. And if you go numb, it also seriously affects your intimate relationships, because if you go numb, the love and the excitement and the intimacy you feel for your partner also goes down. So that is a risky game.
Jullian, that, oh my goodness, just talking about the potential to, if you will, minimize your expression and feeling of emotion in all aspects, not just in the negative, in the positive as well. I mean, that affecting your quality of life is one state. However, we've normalized that. We appreciate that in society. If you are overly expressive, you are looked at as... you almost sideline to say that's a bit too much. The less you express, the less you feel, the happier and the healthier you are. How do we break that stereotype? And I'm saying this for somebody who doesn't want to necessarily go through the process of dealing with pain and grief because it feels a bit too much.
It's completely understandable, and we've also glorified this idea of the strong woman, especially like the strong Black woman who can handle anything. And it sounds like a compliment, but has anyone, like, if you ask yourself, what does that mean for the person who has to swallow it all up? And I had a client once the other day, she said to me, I want my children to say this was a mother with joy in her life, not a strong mother at all points in time. And I think that is very, very important. And if we are taught to be strong, if we're taught not to feel pain, if we're taught not to suffer and always move on, we also teach ourselves and our children that you can't, like, if you give yourself into the pain, you won't find a way out. And it's very interesting that if you go actually and you go through therapy or you do it with yourself and you realize that the pain can come, but it will also leave you. Like, for example, I have a friend at the moment, she can't fall pregnant, and that is a massive loss, a massive gap in her life. And she said, just feeling that I can feel the pain and it's not there forever. It comes, but it also leaves me again, has given me a whole new approach approach to really facing the reality that there's a gap in my life at the moment. So that is one way that we do together. And that is also what we see in a relationship. If your partner holds space and you can break down, but you can also feel that you coming out of that place and your partner is still there, that gives you a massive amount of security in this world. And then the pain also feels different, because a lot of people don't want to feel pain because they think pain will overcome me like a wave and I will drown. But you can actually learn how to swim. And that is what we need to do. And our partners can be an immense source, a resource in that process. If we know I can open up, I can share my pain here, and because I'm sharing it, it feels so much lighter. And a lot of people have to be strong because they have no one who will sit with them through the pain.
The voice of Jullian Hoss joining us this evening, a practicing psychologist and couples therapist known for helping partners reconnect and align, especially during life's hardest seasons. And we are talking about the concept of suffering well. And I suppose tilting towards the question, what does it really take to stand the test of time as a united front? Jullian, I want to stray away from the romantic landscape. Right. I do feel like in very many contexts, and I specifically want to bring those that you chose on the daily, such as a romantic relationship. You chose your partner. With family, you didn't really choose them, so suffer well
didn't really
is for your benefit.
You did not choose.
You did not.
You can leave out that really.
People such as your friends, for one, your partner, these are people you intentionally chose. And sometimes the process of suffering with them feels like they're adding on to the issue. Let's move or shy away a bit from the romantic partner and look at friendships and the importance for making space, because there's almost this assumption that because you are my friend, even though we are going perhaps through the same grief, I could feel entitled to your care during this time. I could feel entitled to your love and affection. And I'm not taking away that you would feel the same with a romantic partner, but I do think that the context is slightly different.
It could be like that, but it's. I think I see it more often that people don't want to be a burden, and then subtly expect that their friends will see what they're going through, that their friends will see how miserable they are, that their friends will see how difficult life is at the moment. And friends often don't see it, especially because we feel it so differently and because we've all conditioned to somehow be strong. And that's why grief and pain can be incredibly isolating. That's what I see often, or more often. And that is incredibly tricky. And the other thing that is really hard is, and I see that over and over again, when our friends are unwell, we jump into problem-solving mode and we throw ideas at them, or we throw advice at them. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Have you tried this? No, just get out of bed. No, just be strong. Don't worry. Things get better. Things will be fine. Don't stress about it. So we brainstorm solutions, and in that brainstorming and this rationalization of the problem, we nearly send the message that please don't feel too much because it weighs me down with you. And that isolates people who are in the pain. So it is an incredibly beautiful intention that we want to solve someone else's problem. We want to solve our friend's problem, but it is just simply impossible because a lot of problems can't be solved easily. And surely our friends have tried everything that they could have tried already to solve their problem. And also sometimes we can just be with someone. And I always say to my clients, I bring this example: if your child comes home from school and something really upset them, like maybe they were bullied or they didn't make it into the sports team they want to get in, or something happened, and you just say, don't worry, we'll find a solution, we'll fix this, next year you'll make it in the team, you'll be fine, sit down, eat something, you'll be okay. How does your child respond? And all of my clients always say, my child will get more angry. And I say, exactly. And that's how we are as people. your friends, your partner, your family. If you just tell another person you'll be fine and I have a million ideas for you, they feel unseen, they feel unheard, they feel alone and isolated, and sometimes even judged for their emotions. So suffering well means I see your pain. I'm here with you. I wish I had words. I wish I could fix it. But I can't, but we'll go through it together. And you don't have to be ashamed.
There is a comment coming in from Lunga Ntlapo saying, I think let's rather call it finding resilience in hardships instead of suffering well. Do you see what I mean, Jullian? Suffer well is a bit of a triggering word. Walk me through why it would be a trigger word. I want to specifically look at the context of suffering and what it does to the individual's understanding.
It's interesting because for me, it's not really a trigger word because I'm a therapist. But when I told my mom what I'll be speaking about tonight, she's like, do you have to speak about suffering well together? Can't you give it another word? So she said exactly the same thing. She's like, can't we say feeling with the partner or something? And I was like, oh, okay, this seems to be something. I think, you know what I've noticed a lot of times when we are in pain or in grief or in hardship, we actually in a battle with our need to control because we are so scared to lose touch. We're so scared to lose control. We're so scared to lose ourselves in the suffering and in the pain. And I think that's why it is important. But I'm trained in systemic therapy, and for us, it's a very important part of how we do therapy. We always look at the resources. We always, and not just financial resources, we always look at what is going well. We always look at what you bring that can walk you through the problem. So for us, it's part and parcel of suffering. But I think that is what people mean. People want to see that I'm walking through it and not that I'm stuck in it. And I think it's a beautiful force of who we are as people. And I love the author Elizabeth Gilbert. She's one of my favorite authors. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but also multiple other books. And she said, what's so fascinating, even in the worst traumas, people will cry and break down, and it doesn't last much longer than half an hour. And then we already think, okay, what's the next step now? What do we need to keep in mind? How do we go about this as a family, as a couple, as friends? And I think it's a basic need we have to look forward. And if people find a language that makes it easier for them, that's fine. What I think is important is that we find community, we find a sense of being connected, we find a sense of empathy whenever we go through the difficulties. That is what matters to me. Because if we, and I always say that looking back in your life, you know, what makes all the difference is not that your parents, your family, your friends, your partner just eradicated your pain or your suffering. What makes all the difference is that they were there with you. And this is something I even check in therapy. When you were sick, when you were crying, when you were heartbroken, was someone there with you, or were you alone?
Jullian joining us this evening, Jullian Hoss. She is a practicing psychologist, a couples therapist, and of course she's known for helping partners reconnect and align. And you can hear it, know that you have retreats that you offer. I can imagine that it extends over to couples as well. We have spoken to you before.
Definitely.
Just looking at the individual, and now we're bringing two together as one. Speaking about two together as one, my producer Nolo joins me in studio. I see that she has grown curious of the subject matter. Nolo, good evening to you. Welcome to Heartlines.
Good evening, my Sheila. Good evening, Jullian. Great to hear from you again.
Good evening. Good to be here again.
Yeah, so Sheila and I like to bounce off ideas throughout the day prior to the show. And when she also said, finding a partner that suffers well with you, the suffering part is what triggered me too. However, I immediately shook my head because I just told myself I feel like I've had my fair share of suffering well with people, and it was not appreciated in the end. So now my question to you is, after therapy, I realized that I have codependent tendencies. So now I want to find out, where do you draw the line between being an empath, feeling with your partner, going through the motions of the ocean, in the oceans with your partner, and being a codependent? How can you see that now you're bordering on codependency, which will be something that will harm you in the end?
Yeah, I like to think in images, and I think Walking the journey with your partner is you side by side with your partner, and you feeling with them, you're empathizing with them. Codependency, or trying to take the suffering of your partner, is you trying to carry them. And that can be very risky because you become a caretaker and you are no longer a partner. And I always encourage my clients to say, remain a partner. Don't become a caretaker. As well as you mean, you are sacrificing your relationship to this person. So that is very important, that even if a person is going through the worst, even if it's depression, we still have to look at them with a sense of them having agency as well, having a sense of control, having an ability to also still decide and walk their steps. So that's the one extreme, is the codependency, if you become a caretaker. And also it's beautiful to look into it, because why do we do that? And often we say, if we feel we can't be loved, we will make ourselves being needed. And that is often people who end up in a caretaking role, because what will happen is that they think, I need to do something for the other person. I need to carry them. I need to save them. I need to help them. Then they will love me. Then they will appreciate me. And then it comes as an utter shock, and you might feel even unloved and unworthy if the person doesn't return the favor. It's an incredibly ungrateful role, because oftentimes, I sometimes joke, but all my jokes actually are my opinions. And I sometimes joke, I say, the worst that you can do to another person is to be a witness of their worst times. Because when they heal and they don't have the maturity to look in the mirror and say, yes, I was that low, you being a witness, you are a reminder they will have to kick you out. And then you've done everything you could have done for them, just for them to kick you out at the end of the day, because they can't bear you seeing them and them knowing what you know. So that is a very dangerous part. So you need to learn to remain a partner. You need to learn to look at your partner and your friend and say, I'm here to assist, to guide, but I'm not going to take responsibility for your pain. And the other extreme is if your partner is going through a lot and you just let them walk alone there. And that is what we then call a never again moment. In friendships, in family, in partnerships, if your partner needs you, if your family member needs you, they reach out and you are nowhere to be found. That's when they will never be really open with you again. We cut back parts of who we are if we feel my pain, my wholeness is not safe with the other person. And in couples therapy, we sometimes realize that 10, 20 years later, when we trace back, where did the issues start? One partner will say, well, I was going through the most. I tried to reach out to you and you were nowhere to be found, emotionally, not physically. Often they are in the same house. So those are the two extremes. The healthy middle is to say, I'm here with you. I can't carry it for you, but we can sit and see what we do together.
Jullian, you have my TikTok raving, okay? Because some of the things you're saying, Nola and I are even looking at each other in the eyes in the studio, and we are shaking, because the reality is that nobody wants to mistreat the next, right? And so my desire,
especially the ones we love,
my desire for your attention, your affection, means there's a hole within myself, but I don't know this. And so I will become the needed and become your caretaker. Meanwhile, I have a hole that I don't know about. Then you don't show up to my party, and now I'm going to come and traumatize you, because, of course, I'm going to now create an outlet, right, that might appear or take form in a different kind or in a different shape. So with that being said, how does one run an introspection that is of value, an efficient introspection that allows you to sit down and gauge who you are and where you stand, so that you're not left prey to becoming a caretaker or somebody who just abandons someone when they're going through a tough time?
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to reflecting on our understanding of love and friendship. Because the most beautiful part is that you want to be there for someone. You don't do it because you feel forced. You don't do it because you want a favor in return. but you do it because it's meaningful to you and you appreciate the connection that you're building with the other. So one thing that you can do in therapy and you can also do for yourself is always ask, what voice inside me or which part inside me encourages me to for the specific action I want to show? Is it ego that I want to stand there at the end and say, I carried you through? Is it the needy part of me that says, if I carry you through, then you will see me, then you will never leave me? Or is it the loving part that actually says, I love you so much, I want to be there with you? So just reflecting on which parts inside you are the motivating forces to do a certain action can be incredibly helpful. Then I think also simple rule, I always joke, we don't lend money, right? You just give the money that you're comfortable to lose. And I think it's the same with support. So just give the support that you're really, really comfortable to give, that you want to share, and you don't expect anything in return, because also no one wants to feel like a burden. So if you do it, but you do it with an attitude that the other person is indebted, no one will actually really appreciate that, because we don't like to be indebted. So give the support that you're comfortable with and that your partner can be comfortable with. And at the end of the day, remember that we often think we have to sacrifice and do something for others. But what we fail to realize is that people want us to feel good in their space, and they want to feel good in our space. I always say there's a difference between doing something for the other and doing something with the other in a friendship, in a relationship. And if you can actually enjoy the journey with your partner, it's so much more worthwhile. And that comes to play even if your partner is going through the most. Find spaces that you can still be okay. And there's a beautiful poem I love by my favorite poet. Her name is Titilope. Her album is called Swim, and she says, if you have panic, your panic will drown us both. But if you're still enough to listen, I can teach you how to swim. And that's the metaphor. If you cling on to the other and we're drowning both, no one gains anything. But if you hear and I can help you to swim, and I can also still be okay and I can feel good with it, then we can go far. So you need to be able to find time to also make sure you are in a good space and you want to help your partner, because if you sacrifice and you're miserable, you can't keep that up for too long. And that's so beautiful, because interesting, look at it, the people who have boundaries and do what they just really want to do, they can keep that up for a very long time. People who overextend themselves and sacrifice will get bitter, passive aggressive, annoyed after a while, and will run at the risk to be aggressive or even push the other person away. So do what also you're comfortable with, and look out for yourself as well, so you can walk the journey for a long, long while and not just sprint it and then get exhausted over it. But that is hard because a lot of us have not learned to be good to themselves. We know how to be good to others, so we have to also learn to be our own friends.
Jullian, here's the theory. We have talked about suffering while alongside a partner, and you've sort of brought us back to an understanding that this conversation has to start with me, right? Do I suffer well with me? Do I take care of me? Do I love me? And I do think that we need to address the concept of self-love, because it does fall into place at this very point. What does self-love look like in 2025? Because we are of the illusion that if I take myself to enough trips, do enough activities, speak to enough people, listen to enough, if you will, self-help content, maybe see a therapist once, twice, 3 times, and I smile at everything, then I'm okay. But clearly, the state of our inner man is reflected in relationship. And so what does self-love look like today, so that we are able to heal and get to a place where we can love effectively in our space?
And it's so interesting because what you just described is we do what we've learned, then we apply it to the idea of concept. We turn it into a project. And I always say to my clients, listen, you are not a self-improvement project. And if you come here with a to-do list of how you need to do things better, please don't choose me as your therapist, because you can't come to me and say, I need to perform better to feel better. If you come to me, it's about you and how you feel. And it's not about the tick box exercise of the trips and the 5 a.m. club and the gym and so forth. Then I don't want you to feel like you now need to increase the heat and the pressure on yourself. That is not what therapy is for. That's not what healing and self-love is for. So for me, it really comes down to how do we speak to ourselves? How do we treat ourselves? And I love the idea of Bell Hooks. She has a whole book about love, all about love, new visions. It was recommended by my best friend Ranso. And it's beautiful because she says we always speak about love, but we don't have a definition. So let us define it. And she defines it as the willingness and the ability to extend ourselves to the holistic and spiritual growth of ourselves or the other. So it's how we show up. It's not that I have to think I'm perfect. Some people can take self-love even to narcissistic ideas of look into the mirror and say you're the best every morning. You don't have to think you're the best to love yourself. You just have to show up the way you love someone else. And I always practice that with clients. I always say, you know what? What would you say to a friend? How would you speak to a friend? What would you wish for your child? And people have the most beautiful ideas. And on the same day, they can beat themselves up like they are and nobody. And I say, hold on, take what we said, what you wish for your friend, for your child, for your partner. Speak to yourself as if you were your own best friend. And I start most of my retreats with a meditation where you think of the person that loves you the most. Can be someone who's around, someone who's late, someone you yet have to meet. And then my clients write a letter to themselves from the person who loves them the most. And they write what that person would wish for them. And that is self-love, that you imagine that source of love and what it would wish for you. And from that starting point, a
Yeah.
whole new self-understanding can develop.
Julianne, as we hold on to the edge of our seat and almost try and hold our chests as though it were comforting our hearts, I have a question here by Lunga Ntlampo that says, what is the fine line between sacrifice and compromise? When do we draw the line between the two?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. And for me, a sacrifice is if you are chopping off your own needs or parts of who you are. The compromise is if everyone can have their needs met and we find a way together that consider everyone's needs. So let me give an example. If, for example, we both have a need to be heard and understood in a relationship, a sacrifice would be to say, okay, I just swallow down that need. I'm not going to ask you and I do everything that you need from me. A compromise would mean you feel hurt if we take a break after a fight and we recoup after 3 days. I would feel hurt if we talk about it immediately. Our compromise is that we agree on a date when we come back together after a fight and then we speak through it. A sacrifice would be to say, okay, you don't want to speak about it, so I will never ask you again. A sacrifice is you can feel it in your body, a sense of discomfort, and almost always results in anger if you practice it for too long, because anger is that one emotion that at some point says, hold on, until here and no further. So that's why you need to be very, very cautious, because a sacrifice also sacrifices the relationship you have, because a true relationship, a true friendship lives by you feeling whole and being able to express and bring your needs to the table and the other person doing the same. So if one of you swallows them, you are not bringing your whole self to the table. And that is the day you start closing doors to the other person. And that is the day you are disconnecting from the other person, always a bit further. So a sacrifice is actually risky. You might think you're doing it for the other person, but if you swallow your own needs, you also swallow the basis of connecting deeply to the other person.
Wow.
So please try to be cautious with that. You can only be in a very intimate relationship if both people or everyone involved can bring their needs to the table.
Our producer has got a final question that she'd like to ask this evening, 13 minutes before the show comes to an end. If you missed out on this conversation, please head over to YouTube and look for Channel Africa, the page, and you'll be sure to hear these words coming from Jullian that have me literally bracing for dear life, okay?
And moreover, they can actually get to put the face to the voice if they go visit the live streaming. So, Jullian, I know I've asked you this before privately in your DMs, but I think if I put you on the spot today, you might give me a definite answer. I've always been so curious about your couples retreats, and I've been asking you, do I have to be in a relationship first to attend your couples retreats? Because I feel like I need a session like that, but do I have to wait until I get a partner?
So the couples retreats are for couples, but I do therapeutic retreats as well. And we have very beautiful healing retreats, and we have retreats where you can find yourself and ground yourself again. And, you know, we are always in a relationship with ourselves as well. In systemic therapy, we believe that we have the different parts. And a huge part of couples therapy is very similar to therapy on our own. It is to really unpack, what have I learned about myself? What have I learned about relationships and love? And what have I learned about the world? And reflecting on that, is that what I want to believe? Because unfortunately, a lot of us have learned about ourselves. I need to do a lot to be good enough. We've learned about the relationships and love that we are only as good and only as loved as much as we can give. And we've learned about the world that it's a scarce place. I mean, to hold on to what we have. And that is a very, very, very vulnerable place to live in. And it's a very, very vulnerable starting point for a relationship. So if you can rewrite those beliefs to something that makes you feel secure, it also allows you to go and relate to your partner from a more secure place. And that's where it comes together. And that's why our farm, where we run the retreats, it has different themes every weekend for the different needs that people come with at the given points in their lives.
Jullian, I'm going to allow you to give us your parting shot for he, she, they listening, thinking this was a rather intriguing conversation. However, I don't even know where to start when it comes to self. We've talked about introspection. We've talked about caregiving, unprovoked. We've talked about sacrifice. We've talked about suffering well. But I'm lost for words at this point. What would you say would be your parting shot?
For me, and I feel incredibly strongly about that, please keep in mind that most of the time the people around you want to feel that you are there with them. They don't want an advice. Usually everything you have to say that sounds clever, they've already thought about. If a person opens up to you with their pain, with their grief, with their emotions, they want to feel seen, and they want to know that you're still there with me. You still love me. I still have a safe space with you, even though I spoke out, even though I shared all of that. And if you bring a million ideas, try to be mindful, because the other person might feel like you're trying to reason away the emotions that they've just shared. And I adore the late psychologist, Dr. Sue Johnson. She's developed the emotional focused therapy that I use in my couples therapy as well. And she always said, people need new experiences, not new ideas. So please be the new experience in another person's life, that they can go through a hard time, but they have someone by their side.
Jullian, oh my goodness. For those who are trying to reach you, because you do give virtual sessions as well, where do they get you? I know you do have a website that's up as well. I just walk us through your platforms.
Yeah, my website www.reflectwithjulian.com, and I'm on Instagram reflect_with_Julian, and they can also reach me just normally on my email info or julian@reflectwithjulian.com, and obviously also find my contact details on the website.
You have left us questioning life, but also grateful that we know so much more. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. It's a huge honor.
The voice of Jullian Hoss, a practicing psychologist and couples therapist known for helping partners reconnect and align, and known today for exposing our inner man, okay? If you were a caregiver in a relationship, if you were the complete nonchalant individual who says, your issue is yours, mine is mine, we have a few things to revisit and reconsider concerning who we are.